Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. We'll give a moment or two for people to keep joining us. So good afternoon. My name is Dr. Lisa Ruhanen. I'm the Director of Education for the UQ Business School, and it's my great pleasure to host today's Lunch and Learn series. We're sad not to have this on campus and be able to see you face to face and talk to you, but it's great that you're able to join us online, and that we have our fantastic Dr. Micheal Axelsen, sorry, who's a Senior Lecturer in Business Information Systems, joining us today. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of country and acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands where we meet today. We pay our respects to their ancestors, past, present and emerging, and recognise their valuable contributions to Australian society. So to warm you up and get you in the mood to join in today, we've got a little icebreaker here. We're going to use a Zoom poll. So Leah, who is working the back end of this, is going to kick that off for me. So a few short questions for you, nothing as hard as your mid-semester exams are going to be, I'm sure. A couple of questions. Are you an undergrad student, postgrad student or research student? Very controversial topic in Australia. Does pineapple belong on a pizza? Yes or no? Those of you that maybe haven't joined us on campus yet in Australia and that are phoning in or zooming in from overseas may not know one of these, that this is one of the big dilemmas we face here in Australia about pineapple on pizza. The third question we have there is, would you rather unlimited free Wi-Fi, unlimited free coffee, I know what I would rather. Question number 4, do you prefer Vegemite or Marmite? And you may be wondering, is there even a difference? Yes, there is a big difference. And the last question for you, what are you missing most at the moment? Live music or traveling? So jump in, answer the questions. Leah is going to show us the results once everyone's had a chance to complete the poll. It's telling me that the host cannot vote, but I'm missing traveling the most. And for those of you that are back in your home country still and haven't got to campus, you're probably missing travel a lot too. So we've got, a pretty even mix of undergrad and postgrad students with us. Welcome. Does pineapple belong on pizza? Yes, really? That's crazy talk, no way. Free Wi-Fi, yep, I agree with that. Free Wi-Fi. Preference for Vegemite? Yes, well done. And oh wow, everyone is missing travel the most. Yeah, it's a very different world, isn't it, without travel. We can't wait for you guys to be able to travel, those of you that aren't in Australia, and come back and join with us. Just wanted to give a little reminder while we have you here about our BELSET team, or our student employability team. There's some information there with the website, email that you can reach out, but BELSET team, if you haven't been involved with them or haven't heard of them before, there's some employability experts and specialists who can assist you with accessing different employment opportunities, placements, and help with managing and preparing for your career. So while you when you have a moment, I do encourage you to reach out if you haven't already done so. I'm now going to introduce Micheal, and I have a short little bio here that I'd like to read about Micheal, because he's a very impressive gentleman. And I say that now that I've lost his bio. Here he is. So Micheal holds a position of Senior Lecturer in Business Information Systems with the UQ Business School, and he's the Program Leader for the Master of Commerce program. Micheal is an experienced information systems professional and accountant with 15 years in consulting. We love Micheal, even though he's an accountant. So he's a great guy. Sorry, Micheal. These are the things I can say when you're on mute and I'm not.
Am I on mute, really?
There he goes. His experience and career includes the evaluation of IS projects, IS audit, and IT management and governance. Micheal's published in a range of areas, including the use of intelligent decision aids in information systems, audit, and information technology governance. Micheal's one of our fantastic teachers in the school. He teaches into the MBA and the Master of Commerce program at UQ. Courses are always hugely popular, which keeps him very busy indeed. So Micheal, without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, and we really look forward to hearing what you've got for us today.
I look forward to hearing what I have to say as well.
Thanks, Micheal.
Here we are. Okay. So firstly, lunch and learn. I can't tell you how disappointed I was to discover I had to bring my own lunch, and I have to bring my own slide deck, which means I do the learn part as well. So yay for coffee. And I do think that there were probably finance students in the audience working out the present value of free Wi-Fi versus free coffee. I reckon I get more utility out of the coffee, actually, because I could save that money and spend it on Wi-Fi, but that's how finance people think. Sorry, Lisa. CyberSecurity, data breaches, and your career. So I want to have this as a bit of a flavor based around what this world we live in means for you and your future career. Okay, so the world is full of people whose career is kind of derailed by something that happens in their past, or their career is a little bit random, right? They sort of fall over and go into something that becomes their career. I think there's probably a few people that would agree with me on that, starting with me. But if we take a look, these are just some recent things, like really recent. The oldest thing here is April 2018. 41% of companies have chosen to make 1,000, they've chosen to make 1,000 sensitive files open to every employee. So everybody in the business has access to this sensitive information. This is not a great idea, in case you're wondering. So in this case here, the organizations just allow everybody to access everything, right? Not a great idea. I did some work with a company where everybody's credit card was available to everybody in the organization. It was a not-for-profit, only staffed by really nice people who would never do anything terrible. Yeah, right. So we got onto that pretty quick because that organization was violating its own payment card industry standard that it needed to do to be able to keep taking credit card details. So that wasn't a great thing. This is a real thing where people steal credit card data and can use it elsewhere. Security awareness training. So for you joining a firm, you would at least need to be aware of the security implications of what you are doing. Now, you might think this is techo-geeko stuff. I advised a panel of people in the Victorian government once, and there was a person working for the minister, or the DG, the Director General, who wrote the entire strategy for the department for the next 3 years and thought, you know what? I think what I will do, I'm not really sure, I've never written a strategy before. Let's get some help. So they posted this draft strategy that the Director General had not seen yet into their LinkedIn group and shared it with only about 50,000 people. So your judgment is really paramount in all of this, right? It's important that you think about how your actions will reflect on you in the future. I've got a couple of examples later on of this long tail of reputation management, but also identity theft and privacy. That's what's going on with this puppy scam, because this person has stolen both the puppy, the $800, and in this case, Rebecca's identity. So there's that kind of thing that's happening. Ransomware has become a business. So ransomware is where you click on a link in your email. It might say, click here for, you know, Ryan Gosling pics or screensaver or Scarlett Johansson. It never is Ryan Gosling or Scarlett Johansson. It's always a bit of ransomware that comes in, takes over your computer, and it encrypts all your data, sends you a ransom, and your business loses all of its data and you lose your job. That's not a good thing. But this link here, the middle screen, and I've got the links here and we'll distribute those slides so you'll be able to access these links. This is from the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner. So we often think of cyber attack in an organisation as being someone who's quite malicious. There's a state actor or a criminal enterprise or someone wanting to get revenge because you've made some bad choice that they didn't agree with. Twitter does that all the time. 61% of attacks are like that. In actual fact, during the time of COVID, okay, that's down 7%. The attackers must be worried about catching a virus. But what's up is 7% human error. So human error is up to 34%. So just over a third of data breaches in organizations are coming from someone inside the organization doing the wrong thing or making a mistake. It's the receptionist at a hospital who turns around the screen and says, oh, is this you? Right? That's a data breach because you've shown them the personal details of somebody and it's not allowed. You can't share personal details. You know, are you in here today for your prostate exam, sir? Right? That's a violation of privacy. And that's why health tops the list because there's a lot of really good data that they have about people and there's a lot of sensitive data. Also, they're very good at reporting when they make a mistake. But 34% human error. Now, in actual fact, that human error figure is probably understated because a lot of these the malicious attacks or a system fault is also human error. System fault can be that they haven't patched their software properly. They haven't got the latest version that plugs a hole in IT. So what we have is human error, and I'm going to make an assumption that we're all on this Zoom call human. We make mistakes, but we can make fewer mistakes if we're vigilant and know what we can and can't do, and some techniques and tips to sort of keep that in the clear. And yes, data breaches are skyrocketing, 67% over 5 years. Now, one of the things there is I think people are more aware of data breaches and that they should report them. And in some countries, like Australia, there are laws that say you should report them, that you have to report them, or you face a hefty fine. So our scope here is to talk about cybersecurity organizations and then what that means for the organization and what that means for you. Okay, so there's a bit of a thread there. Is the threat real? So it's easy to say, I've never been attacked by cyber criminals, therefore it's not a real thing, I don't need to worry about it. That is a little bit of ignorance is bliss, and you are really happy right up until the point where you lose all your data. I'm undertaking a research project at the moment with some large organizations, and not one of them tells me that they have never been attacked by cyber criminals. What they say is, we may have been attacked by cyber criminals, but we don't know about it, right? There is no such thing as being able to completely stop a cyber attack. If I am on the radar of someone with a lot of resources, then my organization just doesn't have the same level of resources. I can't spend $1 billion to defend myself against cyber attack. What I can do is reduce the risk of attack, and I can keep my organization running so that any attack is minimal. I can limit the attack. I can make sure that any attack that happens is not a big deal. But this hacking thing extends way back to 1903, okay? So the very first cyber attack is around the telegraph over a century ago, because people were sending messages coast to coast in the United States and they were advertising it as secure. But someone was able to work out how to plug into the line and work out what messages were being sent. They were not all that secure. And of course, there was the Enigma machine during World War II, but we then quickly hit the computer virus that happened in 1981, the first proof of concept virus in 1981. It attacked an Apple. Even back then, Apples were not particularly common, so I don't know why they attacked an Apple. I'm an Apple user. One of the really big problems with this point, okay, is firstly that I was born after 1903, so I can look back at 1993 and say, hey, those bunch of old people didn't know what they were doing. I'm born before 1981, and I suspect there's a lot of people in the audience who were not born in 1981. So for you, that's ancient history. For me, this was back when I was watching Saturday morning cartoons. Is that still a thing? Not sure. But viruses have been around for a long time. One of the big ones was this AIDS ransomware in 1989. There was also a marijuana one, which helpfully came up and told you your computer has been stoned. So the ransomware is where your computer gets encrypted and you have to send a check to wherever, some PO box in Wisconsin, I think it was, to get your data back. Nowadays, you send Bitcoin and you don't know where the money went, and yeah, but that's ransomware. In America online, people started phishing for sensitive information. So people are really happy to send, put stuff into social media and share it. My sister-in-law this morning, bless her little cotton socks, if your birth date was an amount of money, who would have the most money? Put it in the comments below. So everybody puts in, I'd have $16,730,993. That's your birth date with your name. You got your photo there on Facebook. Thank you very much, identity theft. Or I can use that information to go work out where the person works, and I can turn up in their office and say things like, hey, look, it's Marlene's birthday today and I want to go into the office back there and surprise her. Is that okay? That's social engineering, using that information to gain access to the place. You've now got access to her office and access to company secrets. So probably one of the things here is don't be stupid. I hope my sister-in-law doesn't see this video. Anyway, distributed denial of service attack. This is where computers all attack your computer. So there's a whole bunch of technologies out there that are all compromised and they attack your computer. SQL injection attacks have been around since 1998. WannaCry, some of you will remember that, I hope. If anyone tells me they were in primary school in 2017, I'll Doogie Howser you, which is a really ancient reference. There were 15 billion records, 15 billion. That's a big number. In fact, I have to check the zeros, in May and June. That's mostly because in Thailand, there was a telecommunications company that had all of its records breached. And in July, just a month or two ago, there were only 77 million records lost. Yay. So records are lost, data is lost. There are a number of ways that people can lose data. Oftentimes, if you get a concerted attack, and like this distributed denial of service attack, there are only so many things you can do to prevent that. But there are a lot of things you can do around all of the human side of the equation, okay? So if we take a look at denial of service attack, you can do that one, you can solve that one with technology, but eventually the technology can be overwhelmed. So it becomes a bit of a race to the top, who's got the most technology. An inside attack, trust no one. So if I ring Terry and say to Terry, hi Terry, Look, your work has been really shoddy lately. We're letting you go. Here's your pay, leave us. Make sure you change the password. Or particularly if Terry is the IT administrator, Terry can log back in and start making your life a living hell. When there is an inside attack, trust no one. My favorite inside attack is when there was an organization, it was in Tasmania, husband and wife team were both sacked by the organization, but they worked in IT. So before they left, they walked around and installed pirate software on all the computers. And then when they left, about 2 weeks later, they rang up the Business Software Association of Australia and said, oh, if you go check that organization, you will see they've got a lot of pirate software. Yeah, because they installed it. And they got a lovely bounty for that. So that was a bit interesting. Make sure you have good passwords so password attacks can happen. And keylogger. Why try and bother guessing someone's password when if you get a keylogger for $25.97 and you put it between the keyboard and the computer, it will record the password for you and let you know, which is excellent, very efficient. So there are a number of ways that cyber attacks can take place. They all result in sensitive data that gets into the wild. So if there is a video, if there is research that gets out into the internet, you know, we've all seen pictures, you know, let's share the hell out of this picture because, you know, Rihanna or Beyonce or George Bush or Barack Obama or Donald Trump doesn't want anyone to see this. Once it's out there, it is almost impossible to bring it back in, okay? You can lose reputation. One of the things that might happen from an organizational perspective is you've lost the reputation because of what's in the starter. It might be confidential and it's discovered that you did something that was bad. So that's a loss of reputation. Some would argue it's deserved, mostly anonymous. But you can also lose the reputation that you might have as a cyber secure organization. So if we think about, oh, I don't know, a university, a research institution that loses data for a research project, and all of that confidential research that you've done is now available outside, that's a reputational problem, and people most likely won't want to deal with you if you've lost enough data enough times. They will say, hey, don't trust that organization. They're bad at looking after their data, which is why we have such a rigorous process that we have to go through for our data to gather it. There are some legal liabilities. There are some civil liabilities. So the company might get sued for the loss of data. PCI DSS, I mentioned that earlier, that's the credit card industry standard. And that one is all about looking after credit card numbers. If you breach it, then you will lose access to your credit card market function, which is not a good thing if you're an organization relying on credit cards. And the last one here is your Privacy Act, which is the big one from a legal perspective. So that Privacy Act, we'll talk more about that, but it's got in 13 privacy principles and a data breach notification scheme. And if you muck that up as an organization, the fine is about $2.1 million, but we'll talk about that later. Pay a ransom or lose access to your data, that's a ransomware attack. But even the business interruption, just to fix a cyber attack, even the distraction of defending yourself against it is a business cost. So everyone here is interested in business. You don't want to be in an organization where you get attacked by cyber attacks so often that you can't do your work, or you've got to now notify all these people that you've lost some of their personal data. That's a bad thing. So we've established that 34% of these data breaches are coming from the people in the workplace, right? So all of these people here working in the organization, we can see laptops and phones and iPads and all sorts of things that are there. These are all potential vectors where data can leave the organization. And if you think about it, what is a laptop It's a mobile thing. So I can pick that laptop up, walk out the door. Let's say it's Friday afternoon. What do you do when you work in an organization on Friday afternoon? You have Friday afternoon drinks, and you might go out clubbing or go to the pub afterward, and you leave the laptop with all of your corporate data in the back of a taxi. Very entertaining if it's not your laptop and it's not your business, but there can be a lot of data on that laptop. So the Data Privacy Act puts a floor around what an organization can and should do. So the Data Privacy Act talks about personal information. Now, it talks about personal information, not commercial in confidence information. That's a different legal thing. The only thing that the Data Privacy Act does is talk about credit card information or credit history information, right? So when you're going to go for a job or you've started doing your own startup company, be aware of this Data Privacy Act. Understand the nature of the business. So I would probably feed this into your understanding of the business. What kind of data do they have? Do they meet the criteria? So for example, the Privacy Act has $2.1 million fine for a company in the case of a serious privacy breach. It applies to all Australian companies unless they are a small business operator, which is an organisation with less than $3 million turnover. $3 million turnover is actually pretty small, right? We're all here with a business background. If I've got making 10% profit, I'm making $300,000 on that turnover, which is not bad, but it's, you know, after that, I have to now work through my organisation to comply with the Privacy Act. But there are some exceptions that apply, and guess who they are? One of them, of course, is medical. So if you're an organisation that stores people's health records, it doesn't matter how big you are, the Privacy Act applies. That's pretty expensive. Or guess who? An accountant, right? Financial and legal services. If they've got tax file numbers, which are a government identifier that they use to generate profit to deliver their services, those small businesses can be hit under the TFN rule with this $2.1 million fine. And if we think about a suburban accounting firm, they might think they're exempt, but they're not. So you can use that as a point to say, you know, what are you doing about your data privacy? Because a lot of organizations have actually, the criminals love accounting firms and health firms, because with that information, you can create a full identity for someone. And I believe the latest impact at the moment is that a credit card number on the dark web fetches about $5 a number, but someone's personal identity, their name, their date of birth, their tax file number. I hope my sister-in-law doesn't see one that says post your tax file number here and get a free tax return. What you need to do is protect that very well, okay? That stuff goes for about $50, 10 times more on the dark web for that kind of information. So the first thing you don't want to do is start up work on your first day and realize that you emailed the client list to the wrong organization. Okay, that's a data breach. Also, you also want to have a bit of a history for your boss. You don't want something, you know, bad cropping up in your past history with looking after data. The Privacy Act does only deal with personal information, but it's where information or an opinion about an identified individual or someone who is reasonably identifiable. So you can keep all the information, but so long as the person can't be identified. Okay, so that's what this de-identification is. When you gather personal data, you need to get consent of the identified individual. So you cannot ask someone for their name, date of birth to go in for the dentist, and then sell that information to, say, a life insurance company. The example I've used in my examinations in the past is a company that might get your customer list, like a retail store. I'd used a fashion boutique, you know, Harry's Hip Hair Care or something. And I like my alliteration. And then you have to go, you gather all this information and they're part of a club. And so then what you do is you sell that to, say, nightclubs or pubs in town, and then you end up on that marketing list. You can't do it that way. You have to get the consent of the person before you share that information. And again, if there's a breach like that, $2.1 million. There is a Notifiable Data Breach Scheme, which is the real kicker here. And this is where if you lose data, so someone accesses the data, the personal information, so only personal, then if it's going to result in serious harm to one or more individuals, and you haven't been able to fix it, okay? So one of the things a company finds is, you know, someone sends that email to somebody else, right? And then what they do is they realize, oh, they shouldn't have received that information. You contact the person and they say, oh, I haven't even opened that email. Would you like me to delete it? Yep, delete. And then you say to them, will you give me a stat declaration that says you deleted it and didn't access the information? Why would that be the case? You do that because you want that to say that it's not, you've been able to prevent the likely risk of serious harm. Now, there is a kicker in that, which is you might lose 1,000 people's records, but they might only lose, you know, the harm to them might be worth $5, right? So that would not count as something you needed to notify, but you probably should. Whereas if you lose one record and they might lose $1,000, then that would have to be notified. Okay, so a lot of people err on the side of caution and they just notify and say that this has been done. But we all need to be better stewards of data, particularly as regulations get tighter. So the laws are changing and getting tighter all the time. But the data breach scheme has fines in place, which are $2.1 million again, if unauthorized access occurs and serious harm might have happened. So you must notify the people who were affected, and you tell the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner about the breach, which is what was happening on that very first slide I talked about. And you have to go through a statement, and you've got several days. I want to say 30 days before you have to tell them. And the Privacy Act rules determine whether you're going to be part of their, whether you're covered by the Privacy Act or not. But the trouble that you've got is this thing is a moving target. So I was teaching MBAs 2 years ago, and I confidently had a slide that says Australia does not have a data breach notification scheme, and that what we don't do is really care about it. That was in week one of the 3-week course. By week 2, this legislation had happened. So 2018 is when it came into play, when it started. And ever since then, we've had these penalties. But the Australian Information Commissioner has had a bit of a memorandum. And so last year wrote to the Parliament and said, this doesn't seem to be enough to stop people paying proper attention. So we're going to take a fine of $10 million. Okay, so the least fine you pay is $10 million. But if the company is bigger than that, so if it's more than a $100 million company, they want to take 10% of domestic turnover, and that would be the fine, which is much more what the Europeans would do. Because to some companies, $2 million is not very much. But, you know, if we talk in Qantas or like a life insurance company or Amy insurance company, something like that, Allianz, all of these, 10% of their domestic turnover would be a big deal. So this is what the Commissioner wants to happen. Commissioners tend to get their way. We'll see what happens there. But that's how the European standard works. And Australia is moving more to that European standard. It looks like laws will only get tighter and indeed more expensive. So you can spend a lot on technology if you're a company, and you can spend an awful lot, but technology isn't the answer. We need that smart people who do smart things, right? If you've studied information systems, by now you should know people, process, technology. It's about the people, the process, which is how they use the technology, and the technology itself. The weakest link is the person who uses the computer system. And if they don't follow the process, or it's not a very good process, the technology is not going to solve it. People need to be much more aware, and you can spend very little. So when you're talking to someone in a job interview, these are some of the things that they might do. This is from the Australian Signals Directorate. If you do these 4 things, these top 4 here, right? Application whitelisting, which is only allowing authorized programs to run, keep your applications patched, that kind of thing. Then what you're going to have is, keeping your software up to date. Turn off the Office macro settings. Office has wonderful macros in it. Turn them off, because when you receive an email, it can run, and that's a problem. At least have it prompt. And don't install software you don't use, which goes for your phone as well. And, you know, you should not have, you know, if I've got a laptop, why have I got administrative privileges? Because when ransomware attacks that, you discover that people have very much, it's got full access to the whole computer, and that's a bad thing, okay? So you can restrict the privileges on the computer. That will limit the extent of any incident. And if you only allow authorized programs to run, patch apps, and configure macros and harden the software, if you do that, that will get rid of 85%. So those are 4 simple things, none of which cost any money, that you can do to shut down an attack. So when you go to see an organization, you know, do they do these things? Not everyone will do all of them, but, you know, application whitelisting in particular. If we were building a computer system now, I would not build it so that anyone in the world could send me an application and run it on my computer. Yet that's exactly what we have with an email. So as an employee, okay, so future you, pay attention. If something is funny, your computer's really slow, or you couldn't access that file, you know, just be engaged. Pay attention to what you're doing, because it may be that there's something going on. If there's slow internet, for example, you know, a ransomware attack encrypts your data with a very strong encryption key, and you can't access it anymore. But while it's doing that, someone's computer somewhere is busily running a program to encrypt it, okay? And then what they do as well is some programs steal your data and copy it up onto the web. That's also going to slow your internet down. Obviously, your internet could be slow because this is Australia and we have terrible internet, but just be suspicious, okay? Be vigilant for phishing attacks. You get an email and, you know, come collect something from the post office, or, you know, you've got a parking infringement, click here, or if you don't pay by, you know, 5 o'clock today, you are gone, okay? You are going to have to pay more of a fine, so click here to pay it. These are phishing attacks. I actually spoke with an IS auditor here who said, he gave the fantastic example that the best time to make a phishing attack where you do a spear phish, you attack an organization, you ring up the employee and say, hey, we've got a big bill coming next week, but we changed our banks, and here's the new bank number, and could you just update our records? That's what happened to Brisbane City Council a couple of years ago, and they lost $500,000 because of that, okay? And certainly some of the data people leave around the place makes that easier to happen. You get mysterious pop-ups on your computer system. Be careful about what apps you have on your phone. Some apps have more access to your data than they probably should. And if you've got corporate data on the phone, maybe you should not have that application on the phone, okay? And for an organization, they should be having audit trails so that show you when people are logging onto the computer system. For example, Michael's logging on at 4 a.m. Why is he logging on at 4 a.m.? That information is recorded in the systems, but people don't monitor it. And of course, stay away from the dodgy websites. They're usually well flagged, but they may not be. A lot of the security breaches, phishing, for example, so these are traditional cybersecurity problems. Theft, loss, a lot of it is caused by human type materials or issues. So what you can do is start to build good habits now. Okay, the most powerful force in the universe is the force of habit. If I had gotten into the habit when I was at university of doing morning exercise, middle-age spread would not be such a problem right now, okay? If I build good habits, I'm disciplined about where I store my data and how I use it, I will be a much safer person, and I likely will not have, not guaranteed, but it won't be as easy for someone to attack me later on. Don't write down your passwords. I'm sure that if I walk across the hallway through that door right there, I might find some passwords written down on sticky notes. Don't do that, okay? Sticky notes are fantastic. One of the things that happened at the beginning of COVID, people would take photographs of their workstation. Hello, I'm working from home and this is my setup. Excellent. What have they got? A sticky note with all their passwords on it. Why was it written on a sticky note in the first place? Put it into a password manager. Don't use public internet without a VPN. So a VPN, UQ has one, that's the Cisco VPN that you will use to access your information, do searches. Use a virtual private network. Internet of Things devices are still looking pretty insecure. So do you really need an internet-enabled fridge or an internet-enabled set of scales that you stand on to weigh you? That's always going to end badly. Ask yourself, do you need all of these Internet of Things devices, you know, listening to you? Because they're all vectors for attack. And unless you are good, it could be a lot of work to keep those things very safe. Be suspicious of phishing, scams, and emails. The internet is forever. So I did a lot of social media presentations way back in 2008. So this is Stacey Hedger, who has the world's worst Star Wars trumpet solo. So all I guess I'm saying here is make sure you clean up after yourself, monitor what you do online, because people can use this information to undertake phishing attacks and use your information poorly. In fact, 1 September 2005, Katrina Nugent and Melinda Bird were two secretaries at a law firm, and they had a bit of a spat, a bit of an attack, accusing one person of having stolen their sandwich. This is true. Katrina Nugent accused Melinda of having stolen her sandwich. Now, if you Google this, it is still there, right? And in fact, there is no profile for Katrina Nugent. She probably ended up having to change her name. So definitely data stays around forever. I also hopped on to Stalker Space. We talked about ibises earlier. So this is a post from someone on Stalker Space from 8th November 2012. It is still there. This person is probably out there working in the workforce. And if you search their name, you'll find them here on Stalker Space complaining about creepy as hell ibises. Now that's okay. I think we're all on board with the fact that ibises are creepy as hell. But Stalker Space was originally created so you could stalk people you were attracted to across the university. And there are some comments that are still there that are particularly dodgy, that people may not like having brought up in front of them when they're going for that job interview. So wipe away your digital footprints, at least clean up after yourself, delete those online accounts that you don't use, okay? Particularly abandoned data. We always talk about the USB stick. I can't even find one on my desk now. I don't use them anymore because everything's online. But if it's online, where did you save that file? Was it just a temporary place that you left it? Build these good habits now, because otherwise that will be corporate data in the future. Oh, and this is my Jag from my 1985 Jag. I posted this video 7 years ago. 42,000 people have looked at it. Not a one person has been able to help me fix that problem with the Jag. So yeah, a lot of data privacy problems can happen. Even from that stalker space, I can work out what course the person is doing. I can work out when they went to university. This is all information I can use to track them down and steal their identity or to attack their employer. And CyberSafe, use IT safely. Make sure you keep software up to date. Use your mobile devices securely. Be aware of persistent mobile spyware. So the latest story is an ABC journalist woke up one morning to discover that his phone was being remotely operated by a state actor, and he could see them working on his phone at 3 a.m. And his idea was that they wanted him to see that they were working on his phone. So these things can have very, they can be breached and you don't know that they are breached. So clean phones is always a good thing. Remove outdated apps. Angry Birds is so 5 years ago. Check the Have I Been Pawned website. If you click on that link, you can check your emails to say, hey, my emails are, has it been compromised? Do that, although it's a little scary because you discover just how many times you used that and how many times your data has been lost. And also rethink what data you give away. Too often we're quite happy to put a birth date or something like that into a competition or whatever. I'll bet that if I said, you know, put your name and birth date on the chat right now, a whole bunch of people would put that in there, particularly if I told them that it was a year's worth of coffee at Belltop. Okay, so I'm not going to do that because otherwise that would kind of destroy the purpose of the seminar. But use your IT safely, develop these good habits into the future. And that's really everything that I wanted to talk about. This is my conclusion. You should be conscious of what potential employers will be doing. It won't be possible to be completely safe. Our former Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, recently took a photograph of his boarding pass and put it on Instagram and saying, you know, look, really happy to be back in Australia. And that was used to work out his passport number, his personal address, his phone number, and all of that was not even cyber hacking. It was literally logging in using the information like his name, boarding pass number, and then right-click view source because this app on the airline was insecure. So you probably will make mistakes. The point is you want to make sure that you're aware of them and make as few mistakes as possible. I know I've got a question there, but it's Lisa's job to take over Q&A. So that's over to you, Lisa.
Sorry, Michael, I'm just a little busy staring at my Hey Google, wondering if it's trying to attack me or do something untoward. So,
you do know the answer to that is yes, it is.
Hey Google, you're going to be disconnected. Wow, Michael, fascinating stuff. Google's just talking to me now to tell me that assisting me has been an honor and a pleasure. Okay.
Yes, if I say, hey Google or okay Siri, half of people's phones go off. Yeah. I need an hour to work out how to turn off my phone.
Michael, that was absolutely fascinating. I've written, I've written a ton of things. I know this afternoon I will be deleting all my sticky notes and getting a password.
But don't use the same password either. Use a password manager, have it generate. So if you've got, you know, Sexy Legs 2000 as your password for everything, don't do that. Okay. Also, don't have that password because it's embarrassing. You do need to share it. That happened once. I do know I've got one question there I haven't answered.
You do. I was going to say, I'm not a very sophisticated password manager. At the start of the session, everyone, I'm so sorry I forgot to make the reminder to post any questions that you might have for Michael in the QA. And we do, as Michael said, have one there already. So if you've, like me, got a ton of things that you've been thinking of while Michael's been talking, pop them in the Q&A because we have 5 to 10 minutes to do that. But Michael, can you see that question there from you? Would you like to answer that?
Sure. So the question is, you've given some examples of serious harm, but is there an official scope as to what is determined as serious harm, or is it by each business? Right. So this is the trouble. It's deliberately ambiguous. Okay. It's deliberately ambiguous so that when you are faced with this question, you don't start, oh, look, it's a cent cheaper, right? So it's to do with each individual case, and you need to think long and hard. A, was it personal information you lost? And B, if it was lost, is it serious harm or not? And then if it's serious harm, then can you mitigate it, right? Now, it's deliberately vague because you will err on the side of caution and you will report it. That's deliberately done. They don't want a rule that says anything more than $1. What you would have to do is document your thought process, defend it, and it's probably easier to make sure, there's a name there I recognize, you have to make sure that you document what you did, and it's probably easier to just report it and work that way.
Thanks, Michael. And another question has come in there from Lara.
Mm-hmm. Any software you would recommend to install to be protected from cybersecurity attacks? Honestly, Lara, it's the same as the other points that we've got, which would have to be, if you get rid of if you get rid of applications that you can't, that you don't use, so whitelisting, so only let those ones run. And the main thing then becomes antivirus would be your good software and firewall, configuring up firewalls. Probably the key things you've got to have is your firewall, your antivirus software, and probably your VPN. Have those three together, right? Which leads into the question of suggestions for password managers. I know that Dropbox has a free one. There is one called LastPass, which is good as well. I think it's relatively cheap. I use 1Password. It's relatively expensive, but it's got a bunch of extra features that I put in it, like my software license codes and things like that. The Dropbox one is probably sufficient. There are a couple of open source ones whose names I forget at the moment. LastPass, 1Password. And then what I would do, if you are cheap like me and don't have any money, Google those, go to Alternative 2 website and see what the alternatives might be, okay? Because what you want is a password that's convenient and easy for you to use. So you want it on your phone, on your laptop, so you can access it wherever you go. Because if you can access it wherever you go, you will not put stuff on sticky notes.
That's great. Thanks for that question, Edith. I was going to ask the same one about password managers. Any other questions while we've got Michael? I feel like I learned everything I knew about cybersecurity from watching you on Netflix, and I thought I was quite the expert there. But of course, Michael, you've educated us even further. I guess one question, Michael, that I was sort of thinking about as you were talking, who's going to win the race? You know, is it the good guys or the bad guys, or the good girls or bad girls? You know, every time systems are put in place to try and, you know, prevent hacking and these scams, I guess the hackers and scammers just get a bit smarter, don't they?
That's a systemic issue, right? So to me, what's happening is a war, it's an escalation. And the thing is, it's not a race, right? Because a race has a finish point. And all you're going to do is, if you close off one spot, people will come from another, and it'll become more difficult for people to make attacks. I think the rational answer here is, again, you can prevent most attacks through sensible, straightforward steps that you can take. What you can't do is claim to prevent all attacks. And so what you want to do is make you and the employer you work for really difficult to attack, because then they move on to the next thing, right? So cyber criminals are pretty rational. They go where there's money to be had. You know, why do I rob a bank? Because that's where the money is. Why do I attack healthcare? Why do I attack finance services? Because they've got valuable data, and that's what I can make money out of. So I don't think it's a race per se. I think what you can do is make the strategic investments that make you more difficult, and they move on to somebody else. Because I've spoken with billion-dollar organizations that don't think that they could possibly invest enough to 100% protect against cyber attack.
Michael, we've got a couple of minutes left, and a couple of questions that have just come through. James has asked about your thoughts on data security and things like the COVIDsafe app, which was certainly something that was spoken about a lot. Yes. People were happy to put into Facebook, you know, what else a character they would be with all their personal information, but not a COVID app. What's your thoughts on that one?
Well, I'm going to blend that with the other question because they're similar. Will the password manager breach data? The answer will be yes, some have been. But your password manager and indeed your COVIDsafe does have they encrypt their data, right? So firstly, with the password managers, the data is encrypted, and it should take a long time to sort out and unencrypt things. Whereas with your COVIDsafe in particular, your bigger problem there is the data that it is actually collecting. What data is it collecting? What it should be collecting is just simply this phone was in contact with that phone for this length of time at this, well, not even at that place. That's all it needs. So people have torn apart COVIDsafe, and they found some relatively minor weaknesses, but still weaknesses. But the data can only be released from the phone by you in the app. So COVIDsafe is relatively okay, but if your phone's been compromised, then it's not safe. But if your phone's been compromised, none of the data on your phone is safe. I am much more concerned about the QR code website. So you go to the cafe and you use the QR code and you put in all your information. Those are all very different applications. You don't know when you even when you look at that, you don't even know where it's going. And a lot of your cafes and places like that are not thinking cyber. And you're happily putting in your name and everything that goes on with that.
And we might take a final question here on TikTok.
Lovely. TikTok. Yes, TikTok has security. Absolutely. But who is it for? And again, I suppose what you've got to do is come back to the idea of if you sit down to play poker, right? Whenever there's a poker game, there's always the chump, the person that everyone knows is going to lose the game. Now, if you can't work out in the game who the chump is, you're the chump, right? Similarly, if you aren't paying for it, why is this organization valued as much as it is? It's worth a lot because it's got access to your private information, and what regime is that being kept under? So to me, the security of TikTok, it depends on what you do with it, but it is asking for an awful lot of access to stuff on your phone that it asks for, and there's probably stuff it doesn't ask for. I don't have TikTok on my phone, but that could be just because I don't like 1-minute videos. But the same issue with that applies to all the mobile apps. What I would say is the US arm at least is being sold. I think Oracle and Walmart. Anyway, I don't know that I trust Walmart with my data either. So look, it's a bit of fun. If you are a target, you're probably going to be gotten anyway, but I think you have to wonder about the definitely the security and think about what works for you. Okay.
Fantastic. All right. I'm going to leave that there. Thanks for that great last question, Brianna. Thank you all so much for taking the time to come in and join us today. I hope you had a little bit of lunch behind your laptop, wherever you are. And most importantly, thanks to Micheal for sharing those insights. I think we've all had a very valuable hour spent with you, Micheal, where we have a lot of things to think about. And if you're like me, some work this afternoon to set up password managers at least. And
maybe do a free one.
Account. Thanks so much, everyone. Please take care. Good luck with exams and mid-semester and everything coming up. And we'll be in touch soon. Thanks again. Thanks, Micheal.